Welcome to Season 3 of The Business Gist, where we're always talking about the human side of the bottom line. In this season, we're talking to business owners on how they're navigating the worldwide pandemic, what they're doing to pivot, and how they're making tough choices between people and profit.
On this episode of The Business Gist, we are speaking with Samantha Hanson, Chief Administrative Officer for North Memorial Health.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Business Gist today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
So you are the Chief Administrative Officer for North Memorial. Can you tell us what that means, what you do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As Chief Administrative Officer, I have the opportunity to combine the support services for our health system. With the exception of finance, legal, and compliance, all of the services that are necessary to run our organization, IT, marketing, strategy, innovation, HR, quality, provider services, all fall under the Chief Administrative Officer. Our intent is to pull those teams together and have them work in an aligned and seamless fashion to support the hardworking care professionals across our system.
That is a big job.
It's an honor to do this work, particularly now, as we take our role very seriously in providing vital health care to the community now more than ever. And then also the opportunity to care well for a workforce that finds itself delivering an essential service to our community. But then also every single person personally is going through the same level of concern, challenge in dealing with their personal life, their loved ones, their children, and themselves. And especially over a prolonged period of time, how this pandemic has changed our strategies from day to day is quite remarkable.
So we've talked on a lot of the other podcasts this season about how businesses have pivoted, but now that we're 6 months into it, I would love to talk about how you are, doing exactly what you just said, keeping employees engaged with all of the other stressors that are going on.
I will tell you, pivot is a great word, but how do you describe pivoting sometimes on an hourly, certainly daily, weekly, monthly basis? That's what our healthcare organizations have had to do. In the early days, March, April timeframe, when we were rapidly preparing for what we thought could have been a mass level of COVID-19 infection, similar to what we were observing in communities such as New York or Seattle. Our strategies were laser focused. We were working on transforming our clinical, our emergency management, and our hospital-based services to care for a sudden push, if you will, of customers who need care. Then we had to shift to literally the exact opposite. As non-essential surgeries were stopped and the COVID pandemic didn't necessarily pan out in the way that it had on the coasts here in the Twin Cities, we found ourselves with empty clinics, very low census hospitals, and COVID being at a very moderate rate, low to moderate rate at the time. So we had to shift our entire model, if you will, workforce model, and very quickly moving into how do we execute furloughs very quickly? How do we manage the hearts and minds and engagement of our workforce? We had communication on overdrive to make sure that every person knew what was happening, knew the context in which we were making decisions, and how that impacted them. And then as COVID cases climbed in the state of Minnesota, we found ourselves busily not only caring for a significant patient population of COVID-19, but then in the May, June timeframe, we added back essential surgeries, non-essential surgeries, and we found ourselves with really high levels of our customers, patients, people who needed care from us, and working simultaneously caring for COVID at that. And keep in mind, we have well over 1,000 of our workforce team members who were sent home to work remotely in a matter of days.
Yeah.
And so they were still adjusting and working remotely and learning a whole set of new skills, not unlike the skills that we're exhibiting right here. We all know Microsoft Teams very well, and I'm not sure many of us could have even said that in January. And now look at us. The level of resiliency and ability to respond and not just survive, but thrive amidst the challenges that we've seen is just one of the many things I'm proud of in our health system.
So now that we're about 6 months into it, school's back in session, it's kind of wearing on everybody. And we've kind of come off of that reaction kind of energy that people thrive off of. Are you seeing people kind of maintaining, or are there any struggles with people keeping people engaged?
There are struggles. I think all of us feel that every day. There's this sense of, I've heard this term, and I'm sure you have too. Go ahead, roll your eyes. But that new normal, our new normal is living in a world of social distance, masking, and testing resources, right? Like we're all struggling with that personally. Now you bring that into a workplace and with a healthcare workforce, and that constant struggle of managing the personal strain with what we have to do every day.
Yep.
What we find ourselves right now with school returning is that a significant portion of our workforce count as Tier 1 essential workers as defined by Governor Walz. The problem is that even though they are guaranteed support for daycare through their school districts, we are finding that many school districts have long waiting lists.
Sure.
So what that means is your care teams that need to be at the bedside or in the clinics are struggling to find support for their children so that they can come and do the work that our community needs them to do. And I just don't think that there's the level of awareness of that significant gap. And that's adding a very significant stress on our workforce. You might say, well, Samantha, open a daycare. Let me assure you, my concern is for the safety of children. And children need to be cared for in environments that are set up, trained, and equipped to care for children. So I'm very concerned of, pop-up solutions to take care of our community's children, of essential healthcare workers that we need to do this work for the long haul. So that's my, that's what's keeping me up tonight. But there's an alphabetized list if you'd like that.
Yeah. I mean, just reflecting on 2020, right? There's every week, every month, there's something new, some new twists that people have had to deal with. And I do think that people have been resilient, like you've said, and have been figuring it out and giving it their all. But yeah, how do you continue to work with all those stressors and make sure that you're giving employees what they need? And then at the same time, making sure that your customers are having the experience that you want. So how do you balance that?
From my perspective, those two things are inextricably linked. If your team members, every single one, your workforce, don't have a level of steady support and emotional resiliency, it's virtually impossible for them in a prolonged and authentic way to deliver that level of experience to our customers who depend on them for care. We might be able to do it in moments or days or kind of, we've all had those just got through it days.
Yeah.
You can't do it in a sustained way.
No.
And here's the other thing. No two of us find our resiliency in the same way.
Yes.
Sometimes guided meditation and, hopeful quotes and, work for some people, and yoga and deep breathing and chair massages. And for other people, that's just irritating. that they need to find resiliency in other ways. And so our challenge as a workforce, for our workforce, is to create awareness that investing in and caring for your resiliency is vitally important. And the responsibility is like, find what does it for you and then take advantage of these services. We're fortunate enough to be partnered with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, and we have many opportunities that help, and many of them are virtual. Our wellness program has virtual yoga sessions and fitness sessions, etc. We have a great EAP program that helps provide mental health support. But again, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. Well, you've got a very experienced career in HR. For our listeners that have their own business and might not have access to all of those resources, what are some tips or ideas that you would give them to help create employee engagement?
I would start with leaders. Every day, it's the leader of that team, that supervisor, manager, director, and how they engage in a meaningful way in building those relationships and being in touch with the people on their team that makes the biggest difference. Okay. You can, most employers will have what I call wellness programs or health benefit programs, and those are all really good. And I would encourage you to spend time with your leaders and help equip your leaders with tools for assessing people for well-being, conversation starters, and frankly, the expectations that leaders have more, not less, touch points with their team members, particularly if they're working in a remote fashion. All too frequently, the default is, oh, everybody's working at home, I'm going to keep my same one-on-one schedule. No, you actually have to gas that up because it's so easy for people to feel disconnected and out of touch. And so it's the leader's responsibility to create those patterns of building those relationships. I kind of think about it, and I did this with my kids when they were little, like, how full is your bucket, right? You have to think about your team member as having an emotional bucket, and as a leader, your responsibility is to put drops into that bucket, not take drops out. And what are you doing every day to fill that emotional bucket of your team members? Making sure they're connected to the resources that are available. And it sounds a little touchy-feely. I can, again, feel the eye rolls, but it works. If leaders can prioritize connection and relationship, particularly in these times of strain, you will identify people who are under stress and get them connected with resources before that becomes a more severe episode.
That's great advice. How do you, are there any tangibles that you could give to these leaders that would have remote workforces? Because I think there's a lot of people still working remote, and you do get into that out of sight, out of mind. Yes. I've got a list of things I need to do. I see a lot of leaders that falls to the bottom, and trying to get them to push that to the top. How do you do that?
A really good question, and there are I have many solutions, so let me just prioritize one. Leaders, you are the funnel of information and context for your teams. Make sure you're connected to what's most important in your organization, what's the vision, direction, and updates that you might have, and then synthesize that in your own words and make sure that your team gets it. Not once a month, not once a week, but every day. So what's your update to your team every day? And then have a higher frequency, and it can be completely casual, but make sure that you're checking in with your team at least once a day. And then if you, as you have those more formal one-on-one check-ins where you're checking in on projects, progress, milestones, things you need help with, that kind of thing, that needs to happen with greater frequency, at least twice as frequent as you typically do under normal circumstances. Those are a couple of, help me understand if those aren't deep enough or if there's anything else you'd like me to go into, but that's where I would start.
No, I think that's great advice. I think people are trying to communicate more, but I agree with you. You don't have to have a formal meeting, but even a quick text, how are you doing today? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Pick up the phone.
Recognition is really important in this time as well, because all of us, just being normal human beings, when we feel that that we're distanced a bit from the action, we wonder if the work that we are doing and the efforts that we do have are being noticed. So as you're doubling up on those one-on-ones and that communication, don't forget recognition. Find fun ways, even if it is virtual, to catch people doing things above and beyond expectations and make sure that they know about it. It's in these times of stress, just even the smallest of celebrations can be a bigger boost than you might imagine.
Yeah, and let's talk about recognition, because that is one thing that I talk a lot about with leaders too, is making sure you understand how people want to be recognized.
Good, yes.
Yeah, I remember one time earlier in my career where somebody made a really big deal about a person, recognizing them in front of a big audience, and they were such an introvert and they didn't want it, and it was like,
you're mortified, right?
Yeah, and that I'll never forget that, because it's like, that would have been so good just to have a nice one-on-one, very specific conversation. So how are some of the different ways that you can recognize people?
Well, I think you just brilliantly stated. My recommendation is that, hey, when you are starting a team meeting, if you haven't already done this, ask people what their favorite recognition was. And just as a, kind of just a warm up for your team meeting, but you are in a not so thinly veiled way hearing from that person. Not only do they get to tell you something interesting about themselves, but you also get to understand, was it on stage with a microphone and bright lights? Was it a handwritten note? And in so doing, you can really find out what makes the biggest difference for folks. I try to, I reserve time several times on my calendar each week that I just do nothing but recognition. So we have, many companies have kind of an electronic recognition system. I write personal notes. Sometimes I even write notes to family if I know them, and thank them for their support of our team member, because their team member, worked really long hours, and give their spouse, their significant other, insight into the impact that their spouse is having in our organization, because none of us do this alone, right? We work long hours, and there is typically, it's a balancing act at home. Yeah. Those are a couple of ideas.
I love that idea. That's going to be really hard to carve that time out.
Look, building relationships with people that you're asking everything of. They are spending more time working than they are with their families. They have made a choice. They can work anywhere, and they've made a choice to work with your organization. And sometimes that hour, 3 times a week, or whatever it takes, can make the biggest difference. And just letting people know that you see them, that you appreciate them, especially now, always, but especially now, if you have people who are working in extraordinary circumstances. Either they're working at home remotely and they aren't physically present, or they're working with our customers under extraordinary burdens of PPE and just the concern and fear of working with our COVID customers who need us so badly.
Such good insight. Is there anything else that you'd want to tell our audience of, you started the podcast by talking about thriving. What else you would give them from an advice to thrive right now?
in this time, from a business perspective, there is a palpable sense of urgency to turn our attention to 2021, start planning, pushing, driving for what's next. I just encourage you to do that with just a meter of balance and make sure that your workforce is coming along with you. Because there's no two industries that are the same through COVID. I recognize that a healthcare workforce has had a slightly different experience. But we are all united as leaders in making sure that as we turn that corner and put our sights on 2021, that we don't forget what our workforce has been through personally and professionally, and that we, as senior leaders, before we put our foot fully on the gas pedal, pause for a moment. How fast can your workforce go? And what would the benefits be if we slowed down just a little bit so that we can go faster next year? We're all a little threadbare. And I am seeing, I'm on a few boards, and I also, being an executive here, there's that push-pull of, we got to go, 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 go. 2020 has been nothing what we expected. Now we got to go to 2021. And I love that enthusiasm. And I'm usually at the front of the parade for this. But I have this little mantra that I do is like, go slow to go fast. Bring your workforce along with you. And the benefits will pay off in 2021.
I love that. Absolutely love that. I really think that's what the world needs right now. Just to be able to catch their breath a little bit before we switch into a new year.
Great.
Good.
Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been lovely to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's been so lovely to talk to you too. Thank you so much. And best of luck with everything that you've got going for the rest of this year and for next year.
Thank you. Let's check in again at the front of the year and see where we are. How's that?
Sounds perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on The Business Gist. Make sure to follow us at thebusinessgist.com.